The SharePoint Folder connector has a rather misleading name. The name suggests that it will enable you to connect to a specific folder within a SharePoint site and combine all the files in the folder into a single table in exactly the same way as the regular folder connector. But in fact, what the SharePoint Folder connector actually does is to treat the SharePoint site as the containing folder for all the files. And it retrieves all the files within the site, regardless of location, and completely ignoring any subfolders. So basically, it treats the SharePoint site itself as one giant folder. So if you want to connect to a specific folder within the site, it's up to you to create a filter statement which will limit the location of the files being returned. And once you've targeted the correct folder, you can then combine all the files it contains into a single table. So in this example, we want to connect to a folder called Expenses within a site called SetiSmart. And what we're interested in doing is ignoring all the other files and folders and effectively just going inside the Expenses folder and grabbing all of these files and then combining them into a single table. So in Power BI Desktop, we choose Get Data and More. And the SharePoint Folder connector is fairly conspicuous. As more connectors are added, you may need to click on the search box to find it, and it's also in the File category. So we click on SharePoint Folder and Connect. And in spite of the fact that the connector is called SharePoint Folder, you'll see that what we're asked for is site URL. Enter the root URL for the SharePoint site, not including subfolders. So let's copy the URL of the site from the address bar. So we highlight the part of the URL that identifies the site itself, and that's all we need to copy. Then we click OK, and Power Query now gives us a preview of the files that it's returned. So there's no point at this stage in attempting to combine these because we haven't yet targeted the files that we want. So let's click on Transform Data. So we can now make this query our starting point. If we look at the columns, the most useful one is going to be the folder path, because this shows the location, the folder location of each of the files. So we simply need to create a filter statement on this column which targets the correct folder. And this is the folder that we're interested in, the Expenses folder. So we can simply filter out all of the other folders. So now our query is specifically targeting the folder that we're interested in. And although it's not necessary on this occasion, if we had different file extensions within that folder, we could use the same technique to home in on the specific file extension that we wanted to target. So with that filter in place, now's the appropriate time to think about combining files. So we click on the Combine button, and that brings up the familiar Combine Files dialog, where we have the option of choosing a sample file. On this occasion, all the files are identical, so we can leave the default of first file and click OK to combine the files. So we now have the data that we need in a single table. We can rename query 1 Expenses. And although it's sometimes useful, on this occasion we don't need the name of the file, so we can remove the source.name column. And then we can set the amount, which is a monetary value, to fixed decimal number. So our data is now usable. We can close and apply. And then let's save our changes. And in the next video, we'll discuss the question of retrieving files from subfolders within the SharePoint folder that you've targeted.